Oscar gripped the steering wheel tighter as rain pelted against the windshield of his pickup truck. The wipers worked overtime, but visibility remained poor on the mountain road leading to the Henderson estate. He had accepted this job 3 weeks ago, a simple courier assignment. They'd said, pick up a package from the late Mr. Henderson's property and deliver it to the lawyers in Seattle. The pay was generous enough to cover 2 months of rent, and Oscar needed it desperately after losing his construction job. What they hadn't mentioned was that the package was a 10-year-old girl named Julia. When Oscar arrived at the sprawling Victorian mansion, Mrs. Chen, the estate's housekeeper, answered the door. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched a handkerchief in her weathered hands. "You must be Oscar," she said quietly, stepping aside. "Please, come in." The interior was as imposing as the exterior, mahogany panels, crystal chandeliers and portraits of stern-looking ancestors lining the walls. But what caught Oscar's attention was the small figure sitting on the grand staircase. A worn teddy bear clutched to her chest. Julia had dark hair pulled into 2 braids, and her brown eyes held a wariness that no child should possess. She wore a navy blue dress that looked expensive but slightly too large, as if she'd been expected to grow into it. "This is Julia Henderson," Mrs. Chen said softly. "Mr. Henderson's granddaughter. Her parents died in an accident 2 years ago, and she's been living here with him since. Now that he's passed." She trailed off, unable to finish. Oscar felt his stomach drop. "I was told I was picking up a package. The lawyers said to handle it discreetly," Mrs. Chen explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Julia is to be delivered to the children's home in Seattle. There are no other relatives. You see." Oscar stared at the child on the stairs. Julia stared back, her expression unreadable. He'd expected to transport furniture, maybe some valuable artwork, not a grieving child. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," Oscar began, but Mrs. Chen was already moving toward the stairs. "Her bags are packed. Everything she owns fits in 2 suitcases. The sadness in her voice was palpable. "I would take her myself, but I'm too old for such a long drive, and I have no legal standing." Oscar wanted to walk away. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. But looking at Juliet, her small hands gripping that teddy bear, at the way she sat perfectly still as if afraid to take up too much space, something in his chest tightened. The drive began in silence. Julia sat in the passenger seat, her teddy bear on her lap, staring out at the rain. Oscar tried to focus on the road, but his mind raced. He thought about his own childhood, bouncing between foster homes after his mother's death. He remembered the social workers with their practiced smiles and clipboard assessments. He remembered feeling like a burden, like something to be processed and filed away. "Are you going to leave me at the orphanage and never come back?" Julia's voice was so quiet Oscar almost missed it over the rain. He glanced at her. She wasn't looking at him, still staring at the water streaming down the window. That's the job," Oscar said, but the words felt wrong in his mouth. "That's what everyone does." Julia replied matter-of. "My parents left. Grandpa left. Mrs. Chen is leaving. Everyone leaves." Oscar's hands tightened on the wheel. "Your parents didn't choose to leave. Julia and your grandfather, I know." Her voice was small but steady. "But they're still gone. And now you're taking me somewhere else where I don't know anyone, and then you'll be gone too." They drove for another hour before Oscar pulled into a rest stop. The rain had lessened to a drizzle. Julia followed him into the small diner, still clutching her bear. Oscar ordered coffee for himself and hot chocolate for her. As Julia sipped her drink, leaving a small chocolate mustache on her upper lip, Oscar found himself asking questions. What did she like to do? "Read," she said, "especially adventure stories." What was her favorite subject? Science, because she wanted to understand how things worked. Did she have friends? A few at school, but she hadn't been allowed to say goodbye. With each answer, Julia became less of a package and more of a person. A bright, lonely, resilient person who'd lost everything. Oscar thought about the children's home. He'd been in places like that. Overcrowded, underfunded, well-meaning staff stretched to thin. Julia would be safe there, probably. Fed and clothed and educated. But would she be seen? Would she be known? As they walked back to the truck, Julia reached up and slipped her small hand into his. The gesture was so trusting, so simple, that Oscar felt something crack in his chest. He helped her into the passenger seat and climbed behind the wheel. The GPS showed 3 more hours to Seattle. 3 more hours until he delivered Julia to the system and collected his payment. Oscar started the engine but didn't put the truck in gear. He looked at Julia, who was watching him with those 2 old eyes. "Julia," he said slowly, "what if we didn't go to Seattle?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean ... Oscar took a deep breath. He was thinking about his small apartment, about the spare room he used for storage. He was thinking about stability he barely had, about a life he wasn't sure he could provide. But he was also thinking about the look in Julia's eyes when she'd asked if he was going to leave her. I mean, what if I talked to those lawyers about something different? What if, instead of taking you to a home, I became your home? Julia's eyes widened. You'd want to keep me. I'd want to try, Oscar said honestly. I'm not rich, and I'm not perfect, and I don't know the first thing about raising a kid. But I know what it feels like to be alone, and I think maybe we could figure it out together. For the first time since he'd met her, Julia smiled. It was a small, tentative thing, but it was real. Oscar pulled out his phone and dialed the lawyer's office. He had a choice to make, and for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what the right choice was. The rain had stopped, and through the clouds the first rays of sunlight were breaking through.